I used to not mind random spam texts or getting texts from random numbers. It never really bothered me. Not until I started receiving texts from a random number that started making me look over my shoulder everywhere that I went. The first text that I got came in the middle of the night. All it said was, "Hey, how's it going?" I didn't respond because I was trying to get some sleep for work the next day, and I also didn't recognize the number or the area code. I decided to leave it for the morning, but when I woke up, I noticed that I had two more texts from that number, each spaced out about an hour apart. The second text that I got read, "Why are you not answering?" which made me figure that whoever it was that was texting me almost definitely had the wrong number. But that all changed with the third text. "You'll regret ignoring me." As soon as I got some coffee in me, I responded and apologized to the person and let them know that they had the wrong number. I assumed that I wouldn't hear any more from them, but as I was on my way out the door for work, I got another text. "This ain't the wrong number. I'm talking to exactly who I'm supposed to." I answered by assuring the person that they were talking to the wrong guy, and I asked them not to contact me anymore. That was the last I heard from them that day, and honestly, I thought I was finally done with it. That changed the next morning when I got a text saying, "Have fun at work. I'll be watching your place while you're gone." It was from the same number that was harassing me the day before. I ignored the text and made sure to lock my apartment door before leaving. A few hours passed and I was in the middle of my shift at work when I got another text from the person. "Do you not think I know where you are? I'm always watching you." By that point, I was so frustrated that I lashed out at the person a bit. I responded by telling them in a much ruder fashion than before that they had the wrong number, and if they continued to talk to me like that, I would have to report it. The person didn't like that threat though, and responded very quickly by proving that they were actually watching me. In the following text, they asked me how my lunch was and then described the sandwich that I ordered from the deli next door to my job. Then they followed it up by telling me that they could follow me for the rest of my life if they wanted to. The whole rest of the day, I was uneasy, and everywhere I looked, I tried to make sure that I wasn't being followed. I didn't receive any more texts that day, but I had a hard time sleeping through the night. Every noise that I heard in the apartment hallway made me jump, and I really felt like I was in danger. The night eventually passed, and by the time I made it into work the next day, I hadn't gotten any messages from the stranger. It wasn't until the back half of my shift that they contacted me again. This time, it was with a picture though, and because of my phone settings, I couldn't see it until it was downloaded. Now, by this point, I had told one of my coworkers about the person texting me, so I asked them if they wanted to see whatever picture it was that they sent me. They walked over to me as I gave my phone permission to download the image, and when I saw it, I almost dropped my phone. The picture was of my kitchen, and it looked like it was taken from inside my apartment. To make things worse, I could see the plate that I had used for eggs that morning sitting on the counter near the sink, meaning that the picture was taken that day. I started to panic. Whoever it was that was harassing me had managed to get into my apartment. I knew I couldn't stay at my place that night, so I called up my family and ended up staying with my parents. I contacted the police and explained everything that had happened and showed them the messages that I received. They assured me that they would look into it and told me to block the number from my phone, which I did. But when a week passed and I hadn't heard anything, I felt as though nothing would happen. I didn't feel safe in my own apartment anymore, so I contacted my landlord and ended my lease early before moving back home. To this day, I still don't know who was texting me or why they were so obsessed with terrorizing me. I'm just thankful I never ran into them in person. I usually never have the money to order food for delivery, especially with the rent constantly being raised, which is why it was so weird when I got a random text from a person one day who claimed to be a DoorDash driver. The message was really short and simple. All it said was, "Hello, I'm your DoorDash driver. I'm pulling up with your food." Now, I wouldn't say I live in the middle of nowhere, but my house was about 20 minutes away from the nearest town and surrounded by trees, so I was pretty sure that they couldn't have actually been pulling up to my house. I checked the front window anyway and looked down the driveway toward the road, and sure enough, I didn't see anyone. I texted the person back and said, "Sorry, but I'm pretty sure you have the wrong number. I hope you have a good day." When I didn't get a response, I figured that was the end of it and just moved on with my day. That night though, as I called my dog back into the house and locked up, I couldn't help but feel like something was weird outside. I made sure that both the front and back door to my house was locked, and as I was walking back to the living room to sit on my computer for a bit, I heard my phone go off. It was on the charger in my bedroom, so I walked back and checked it, and was surprised to see a text from the same number as the supposed delivery driver from earlier. This time, the message was even shorter. All it said was, "Yo, I'm outside." I thought to myself, what do you mean? I don't even know who you are. But as I was getting ready to respond to the person, I got distracted by my dog. Out of nowhere, he went from laying on the bed to standing up in a very pointed position and just stared at the bedroom door. I looked over to the door, but I didn't see anything. I looked back at my dog, and before I could ask him what was wrong, he hopped off the bed and started moving very cautiously out of my room. I started getting a really bad feeling in my gut because I had never seen him act like this in the 5 years that I had him. I slowly walked out of the room after him with the phone in my hand, still open to the random text that I got. I made my way out into the living room and looked out the front window toward the driveway, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. That was until I went to step back from the window. I noticed that the motion light that I had installed on the side of my house turned on. I quickly ran over to the window that faced out of the house that way, and even though the yard was now lit up, I still couldn't see anyone. I figured I would take a second and text that person back. I started to type out that they had the wrong number again, but before I could hit send, my dog distracted me again. As I was texting the person back, I heard my dog start to growl, which again, he never really did. I walked over to him and noticed that he was looking right at the back door of my house. As I sat there and stared at the door, wondering what he was freaking out about, I heard it. Out of nowhere, it sounded like someone was walking around the porch in the back of my house. My dog continued to growl, and as I looked around for any sort of weapon, I heard the footsteps get closer to the door. Suddenly, the doorknob started to move, as if someone was trying to turn it from the outside. Thankfully, it didn't open. My dog started barking and practically lunged at the door. That's when I decided to run into the kitchen and grab the biggest knife that I had. By the time I got back to the door, though, I couldn't hear anyone on the porch anymore. I waited a minute, and my dog stopped growling as well. I decided to go and look out of all the windows to see if I noticed anything, but by that point, the motion lights had turned off. I went back to my dog, and he was acting like everything was totally normal. I was so confused about what happened. That was when I received that last text from that strange number. This time it said, "My bad, wrong house. You got lucky." In the morning, I ended up contacting the police and gave them the number, but they were honest about there not being much they could have done at that time. I never heard from that number again though, but I certainly fear for anyone who has. I was 15 years old when I started getting these weird texts, and since then I've had a weird fear of basements. Where I lived at the time was a small house with my parents, which consisted of 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a basement. I used to like hanging out with my friends in the basement, and we even had a ping pong table down there for us to use. But eventually, I started spending more and more time in my room, and after the text I received, I'm glad I did. The first text came while I was watching some TV and waiting for dinner to be finished. I didn't know the number, and the person didn't introduce themselves at all. All they said was, "There's a man in the basement." I was confused at first, and I texted them back saying that I got a new phone and didn't know who I was talking to. A few minutes later, I got a response, but all it said was the same thing. "There's a man in the basement." I decided to ignore it and kept watching TV. After my mom finished making dinner, she called me in to set the table, and by that point, I had kind of forgotten about the text. That is, until I passed by the basement door. As I walked by it, I figured that there was no harm in poking my head down there and checking it out. I told my mom I had to get something from the basement and open the door. I'll admit, it took me a second to get the courage to actually walk down there alone, but when I made it down the stairs, I could see that it was empty and just laughed to myself. I walked back up the stairs and had dinner only to forget all about the text. I didn't hear anything from that number at all for the next couple of days. But what must have been almost a week later, as I was working on some homework, I got a text from that same random number. "There's a man in your basement." I noticed that this time they said your basement instead of the basement, and that made me feel a little weird. I texted the number back and told them that I tried to tell them that they had the wrong number, and then I lied and even said that I didn't have a basement. That got them to respond a bit differently that time. The next text I got said, "You really should check it. He's waiting for you." I didn't like the tone of that text, and I tried to ignore it and go back to doing my homework, but I couldn't help but think about there being someone in my basement. After a few minutes, I decided to check it out just so that I could ease my mind. I grabbed a bat from my room and slowly opened the door to the basement. My heart started to beat a little bit faster, and it took me a minute to convince my legs to actually move, but eventually, I made it down the stairs. Once again, it looked like no one was there, and after taking a closer look, I decided to run back up the stairs and once again try to forget about it. Another few days passed without any texts from that number, but I should have known they weren't done with me. A few days later, I got a very familiar text from that number saying once again, "There's a man in your basement." This time, I just put my phone down and completely ignored it. I just sat on the couch and kept watching TV. A few minutes passed, and I hoped that whoever it was had gotten bored and stopped messing with me. That was when I heard a sound that I still fear to this very day. Out of nowhere, I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps walking up the basement stairs. I looked over toward the hallway, and my mom, who was in her room and also heard the noise, even came to check what it was. I told her about the text that I was getting, and she got mad at me for not telling her sooner. She called my dad, who was out in the driveway working on the car, and he came into the house. By that point, though, we couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. We told my dad what happened, and he didn't hesitate as he walked over to the basement door and threw it open. To all of our surprise, though, there was nothing on the other side of it. We all went into the basement, but didn't see any sign that anyone had been there. Despite that, though, my mom couldn't help but feel uneasy in that house. After that, I didn't receive any more texts from that random number. Our lease was up a few months later, and we ended up moving to a slightly smaller house a few streets over. But I don't think I'll ever not wonder who or what was moving in my basement and why someone was constantly texting me about it.